An arrogant billionaire insults a little girl in Mandarin, thinking no one would understand his cruel words. But when the girl responds fluently, revealing every insult, he freezes in shock. Before we start, I love seeing this community grow. Feel free to introduce yourself below. The February morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Chen's penthouse office on the 47th floor, casting geometric shadows across imported Italian marble. At 36, Marcus had mastered the art of intimidation, from his perfectly tailored Brioni suits to the calculated coldness in his dark eyes that made even seasoned investors nervous. Today, that coldness would meet something he never expected, a mirror held up by the smallest hands. "Mr. Chen, your 9 a.m. is here." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Marcus didn't look up from his laptop screen, where stock prices flickered in real time. "Send them to conference room B. I'll be there in 10 minutes. And where's Maria? This coffee is cold." What Marcus didn't know was that Maria Santos, his housekeeper of 3 years, had called in sick that morning. Her replacement was her sister Rosa, who had no choice but to bring her 6-year-old daughter Sophie to work. The building's daycare was closed for emergency repairs, and Rosa couldn't afford to miss a day's pay. Rosa knocked softly on the office door. Sophie's small hand clasped tightly in hers. The little girl wore a yellow dress with white flowers, her dark hair pulled back in 2 neat braids. In her free hand, she clutched a worn picture book with Chinese characters on the cover. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Chen," Rosa began, her voice trembling slightly. "My sister is sick, and I had nowhere to leave Sophie. She'll be very quiet, I promise. She'll just sit in the corner with her book." Marcus's head snapped up, his expression darkening immediately. A child. In his office. This was exactly the kind of disruption he couldn't tolerate, especially not today when he had the Whitmore merger to finalize. "This is completely unacceptable," Marcus said, his voice low and controlled, but Rosa could hear the anger simmering beneath. "I don't run a daycare center, and I certainly don't pay you to bring your family to work." Sophie, sensing her mother's distress, looked up at the tall man behind the enormous desk. She had seen angry adults before, had learned to make herself very small when grown-ups used that tone. But there was something about this man's eyes that seemed sad beneath all that anger, like her grandma May's eyes sometimes looked when she talked about the old country. "Please, Mr. Chen," Rosa pleaded, "just for today. I'll work extra hours this week to make up." "Did you hear what I said?" Marcus interrupted, switching suddenly to Mandarin, a language he rarely used anymore, having spent the last 15 years deliberately distancing himself from his Chinese heritage. "这个女孩看起来又脏又穷，她可能会偷东西或者迫害什么。This girl looks dirty and poor. She'll probably steal something or break something," he continued, his Mandarin flowing with bitter fluency, each word carefully chosen to wound. 为什么穷人总是给我添麻烦？他们这种人永远不会明白真正的成功是什么。Why do poor people always cause me problems? People like them will never understand what real success is." Rosa stood frozen, not understanding the words but feeling their venom. She was about to apologize again when something remarkable happened. Sophie released her mother's hand and took 3 small steps forward. Her brown eyes locked onto Marcus's face with an intensity unusual for a 6-year-old. When she spoke, her Mandarin was clear, precise, and utterly calm. 我不脏也不会偷东西。我奶奶教我，真正富有的人心里有善良，而不是只有钱。I am not dirty, and I won't steal anything. My grandmother taught me that truly rich people have kindness in their hearts, not just money. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus Chen, who had just closed a $2 billion deal without blinking, felt his entire body go rigid. The laptop screen blurred before his eyes. This couldn't be happening. This child, this 6-year-old girl in a wrinkled yellow dress, had just spoken perfect Mandarin with a Beijing accent that was better than his own. "Ni, you." Marcus started, but his voice had lost all its authority. Sophie wasn't finished. She took another small step forward, and in that moment, she seemed far older than 6 years. 我奶奶没说，忘记自己从哪里来的人会迷路。你迷路了吗，陈先生? My grandma May says that people who forget where they come from get lost. Are you lost, Mr. Chen? Rosa gasped. Sophie, you speak. How do you? But Sophie's eyes never left Marcus's face. She was waiting for an answer to a question that had just stripped away every defense he'd built over 16 years. Marcus's hand gripped the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. Memories he'd buried deep began to surface. A small apartment in Flushing, Queens. The smell of his grandmother's dumplings. Angry words from his father about ambition and forgetting who you are. The day he'd changed his business cards from Chen Ming to Marcus Chen and never looked back. Where? Marcus's voice came out hoarse. Where did you learn Mandarin? Grandma Maid teaches me every Saturday, Sophie said, switching back to English, her small voice proud. She's from Beijing. She says languages are bridges between hearts, and I should learn to build bridges, not walls. The picture book in Sophie's hand fell to the floor, revealing its cover. Cheng Yu Gu Shi, Chinese Idiom Stories. Marcus recognized it instantly. It was the same book his own grandmother had read to him 40 years ago before everything changed. Rosa found her voice finally. Sophie's been studying with her grandmother for 2 years. We didn't. I never mentioned it because, get out, Marcus said quietly. Please, Mr. Chen. I said get out, Marcus roared, his control finally shattering. Both of you, now. As Rosa hurried Sophie toward the door, the little girl paused and looked back. 我会为你祈祷，陈先生。奶奶说迷路的人需要最多的祈祷。I will pray for you, Mr. Chen. Grandma says lost people need the most prayers. The door closed with a soft click. Marcus stood alone in his empire of glass and steel, while a 6-year-old's words echoed in a language he'd tried to forget. A language that had just ripped open every wound he thought had healed. He walked to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass, and for the first time in 16 years, Marcus Chen, the man who never cried, who never showed weakness, felt tears burning behind his eyes. Because in those few words of Mandarin, Sophie hadn't just exposed his cruelty. She'd exposed the truth he'd been running from all along. 02. The Whitmore merger meeting was a disaster. Marcus couldn't concentrate, couldn't muster his usual razor-sharp focus. Every time Jeffrey Whitmore spoke about maintaining company culture and honoring heritage, Marcus saw Sophie's brown eyes, heard her small voice asking if he was lost. By 11 a.m., he'd snapped at his CFO twice and contradicted himself 3 times. Jeffrey Whitmore finally suggested they reconvene the following week, his expression polite but concerned. Marcus didn't argue. Back in his office, Marcus pulled up the personnel files. Rosa Santos, age 33, single mother. Lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in Jackson Heights, Queens. No mention of her mother in the emergency contacts. No mention of any Chinese connection. His finger hovered over the intercom button. He could fire Rosa right now. Eliminate the problem. Pretend this morning never happened. Instead, he found himself typing Chenming, New York into the search bar. The results made him close the laptop abruptly. He hadn't searched his birth name in years. Didn't want to know what remained of that life. The afternoon crawled by. Marcus canceled his remaining meetings, claiming a migraine, something he never did. His assistant, Jennifer, had worked for him for 8 years and had never once heard him admit to physical weakness. At 6 p.m., as the sun began setting over Manhattan, painting the city in shades of gold and amber, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. He pulled on his coat, took the private elevator down to the parking garage and told his driver to go home. I'll drive myself tonight. 20 minutes later, his Mercedes was heading east on the Long Island Expressway, toward Queens. Toward a world he'd left behind and sworn never to return to. Jackson Heights hadn't changed much. The same narrow streets, the same mix of languages floating from open windows, Spanish, Hindi, Bengali, and yes, Mandarin. The same small grocery stores with vegetables he recognized from childhood but couldn't name in English. Rosa's building was a modest 5-story walk-up with faded red brick and a broken intercom. Marcus sat in his car across the street for 20 minutes watching. What was he doing here? What did he possibly hope to accomplish? He was about to start the car and leave when he saw them. Rosa and Sophie, walking home from the subway station. Sophie still wore her yellow dress but now had a small backpack with cartoon characters on it. She was talking animatedly to her mother, her hands gesturing as she spoke. Marcus got out of the car before he could talk himself out of it. Mr. Chen? Rosa stopped abruptly, instinctively pulling Sophie behind her. I was going to call tomorrow to apologize again. Don't. Marcus raised his hand, then lowered it awkwardly. He'd never been good at apologies. Had spent 16 years making sure he never had to make them. I need to speak with Sophie's grandmother, Grandma May. Rosa's expression shifted from fear to confusion. My mother? Why would you want to? Please. The word felt foreign in Marcus's mouth. Just 5 minutes. Sophie peeked out from behind her mother, her eyes bright with curiosity rather than fear. Grandma May is upstairs. She's making dumplings for dinner. The smell hit Marcus the moment they entered the apartment. Pork and chives, ginger and sesame oil, the exact combination his own grandmother had used. His throat tightened. The apartment was small but immaculate. Every surface gleamed and the walls were covered with Sophie's artwork, colorful drawings and Chinese characters practiced over and over with careful strokes. An elderly Chinese woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She was perhaps 70, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that seemed to see right through Marcus's expensive suit, to the frightened boy beneath. Nai, 这是Chen先生, Sophie announced, switching effortlessly to Mandarin. 他今天很生气，但我觉得他其实很伤心. Grandma, this is Mr. Chen. He was very angry today, but I think he's actually very sad. Grandma May studied Marcus for a long moment, and he had the unsettling sensation of being completely transparent. Then she smiled, not mockingly, but with infinite sadness and understanding. Chen Ming, she said softly, using his birth name though he'd never given it. Shinima? Chen Ming, is that you? Marcus felt the floor shift beneath his feet. How did you? Come sit, Grandma May said, this time in English, gesturing to the small dining table. Rosa, kuge sufei shizao. Rosa, go give Sophie a bath. When Rosa hesitated, May added firmly, Woman shuyao shuohua. We need to talk. Once they were alone, May poured tea from a ceramic pot decorated with blue dragons. The jasmine scent transported Marcus back 30 years. Your grandmother and I were friends, May said quietly, pushing the cup toward him. In Flushing, before you became Marcus, before you decided to erase who you were. Marcus's hand trembled as he lifted the cup. My grandmother died 12 years ago. I know. I went to her funeral. You weren't there. The accusation hung in the air. Marcus had been in Tokyo, closing a deal he'd convinced himself couldn't wait. The truth was he'd been afraid of the memories, afraid of the disappointment in the eyes of people who'd known Chen Ming, the boy who'd promised to honor his family. She used to talk about you, May continued, her voice gentle but relentless, about how brilliant you were, how ambitious. She was so proud when you got into Harvard. But then, May paused, studying Marcus's face. Then you stopped visiting, stopped calling, changed your name. She died wondering if she'd failed you somehow. She didn't fail me, Marcus said hoarsely. I had to become someone else to succeed. The business world doesn't respect. Don't lie to me, Chen Ming. May's voice was sharp now. And don't lie to yourself. You didn't change your name for business. You changed it because you were ashamed.
Ashamed of being poor, ashamed of the accent, ashamed of the grandmother who raised you while your parents worked 3 jobs. Every word was a knife, precisely placed. Marcus wanted to stand up, to leave, to escape back to his world of glass towers where no one knew Chen Ming, but he couldn't move. Why did you come here tonight?
May asked, her tone softening. I don't know, Marcus admitted. Sophie, what she said this morning, I needed to understand. Understand what? How she knows about being lost. May smiled sadly. Sophie is 6 years old, but she has an old soul. She sees things others miss. When Rosa told me what you said, the words you used, Sophie wasn't angry. She was worried about you. Worried about me? Marcus nearly laughed. I insulted her, called her dirty, poor. She knows what real poverty is, May interrupted. Not having money, but having a heart too closed to let love in. That's the poverty she saw in you. Through the thin walls, Marcus could hear Sophie singing in the bathroom, a Chinese children's song about the moon. The same song his grandmother had sung to him. I don't know how to fix this, Marcus said quietly. Any of it. May reached across the table and did something no one had done to Marcus in 16 years. She took his hand in both of hers, her skin paper-thin but warm. You don't fix 16 years in one night, she said, but you can start by answering one question truthfully. Are you lost, Chen Ming? Marcus looked into her eyes and saw his grandmother there. Saw Sophie. Saw every person he'd trampled on his climb to success. And for the first time since he'd walked away from Flushing, Queens with a full scholarship and empty promises, Marcus Chen told the truth. Yes, he whispered. I'm very lost. Urdur. Marcus didn't leave Rosa's apartment until nearly 10 p.m. In those hours, Grandma May had done something remarkable. She'd listened without judgment as Marcus talked about things he'd never told anyone. The pressure to succeed, the shame of his accent in Harvard's hallowed halls. The day a classmate had mocked his lunch of leftover dumplings and Marcus had thrown them away and never brought Chinese food again. The gradual erasure of Chen Ming, piece by piece, until only Marcus remained. Sophie had emerged from her bath in pajamas covered with stars, her damp hair braided by Rosa. She'd climbed into Grandma May's lap without asking Marcus to leave, treating his presence as natural. While May spoke to Marcus in Mandarin, Sophie had opened her picture book and began reading aloud, her pronunciation perfect. Ting Chi Lai Xiang Ta Nai Nai, May had said proudly. She sounds like her grandmother. Then, to Sophie in English, show Mr. Chen what you've been learning. Sophie had scrambled down and returned with a notebook filled with Chinese characters, each one copied with painstaking care. But it wasn't just rote learning. Next to each character, she'd drawn pictures to help remember the meanings. Next to Jia, home, she'd drawn her apartment building with her family in the windows. Next to Chow, bridge, she'd drawn two stick figures holding hands across a gap. The character for listening, Sophie explained, pointing to Ting, has the character for ear but also the character for heart. A Grandma May says real listening is with your heart, not just your ears. Marcus had stared at those carefully drawn characters and felt something crack open inside his chest. When was the last time he'd listened with his heart? When had he stopped? Now driving back to Manhattan in the late evening quiet, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his entire life had just tilted on its axis. At a red light, he pulled out his phone and scrolled to a number he hadn't called in years. His father, Raymond Chen, who still lived in the Flushing apartment where Marcus had grown up. His finger hovered over the call button. What would he even say? Hi, Dad. I just spent the evening with a stranger who knew Grandma better than I did in her final years. The light turned green. Marcus put the phone away without calling. The penthouse felt cavernous and cold when he arrived home. 47th floor, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen he never used. All of it worth less than a 6-year-old's notebook of carefully copied characters. Sleep didn't come. At 2 a.m., Marcus found himself in his study, pulling down boxes he hadn't opened since moving in 5 years ago. At the bottom of the third box, wrapped in newspaper yellowed with age, he found it. A small jade pendant on a red string, worn smooth by generations of hands. His grandmother had given it to him the day he'd left for Harvard. Jia, she'd said, pointing to the character carved into the jade. No matter how far you go, remember home. He'd worn it for exactly 1 semester before tucking it away, embarrassed when a girlfriend had asked about the Chinese thing around his neck. Marcus held the pendant up to the light, and in the jade's depths, he swore he could see his grandmother's face. The next morning, Marcus did something else he'd never done. He arrived at the office at 10 a.m. instead of 6. Jennifer nearly dropped her coffee in shock. Are you feeling all right, Mr. Chen? Cancel my morning meetings, Marcus said, and get me Rosa Santos's personnel file again. I need her full address and her mother's contact information. Is there a problem with her work? No, Marcus said, surprising himself with the words that came next. I need to make something right. By noon, Marcus had made 3 phone calls that would have seemed impossible 24 hours ago. The first was to his attorney asking about establishing a scholarship fund. The second was to his accountant, requesting information on educational trusts. The third was to a Mandarin tutor he'd found through Columbia University. I need to relearn, Marcus had explained to the tutor, Dr. Lin. I studied as a child, but I've forgotten too much. Dr. Lin had been quiet for a moment. Forgetting a language is like forgetting a part of yourself. But the good news is it's never truly gone. It's just sleeping. At 3 p.m., Marcus stood in front of Rosa's apartment building again, but this time he wasn't alone. He'd brought his driver, who was helping unload boxes from the trunk. Rosa answered the door with Sophie peeking around her legs. Her expression was wary. Mr. Chen, Please let me speak, Marcus interrupted gently. He held up a hand, and the driver brought forward the first box. Yesterday I said terrible things, not just to Sophie, but about her, about you, about people I don't even know. I can't take those words back, but I can try to do better. He gestured to the boxes. These are books. Chinese language books, children's literature, history. For Sophie's studies with her grandmother. I called a professor friend at Columbia, and he recommended these specific titles for her level. Rosa's eyes widened. Mr. Chen, we can't accept. The second box, Marcus continued, contains information about a scholarship fund I'm establishing. It's for children from immigrant families who are studying their heritage languages. Sophie will be the first recipient if Grandma May agrees to be part of the selection committee. Sophie had emerged fully now, staring at the boxes with wonder. Gendama? Really? Gende, Marcus confirmed, then knelt down so he was eye level with her. The jade pendant hung visible around his neck now, resting against his white shirt. Sophie, you asked me yesterday if I was lost. The answer is yes, but I'm trying to find my way home. Sophie studied him seriously, then reached out and touched the jade pendant. Gia, she read the character aloud. Home. My grandmother gave me this, Marcus said quietly. I stopped wearing it because I thought it made me weak. But you taught me something. Forgetting where you come from doesn't make you strong. It just makes you lost. Grandma May appeared in the doorway, wiping flour from her hands. She looked at Marcus, at the boxes, at the pendant around his neck. Then she spoke in Mandarin, her voice warm. Milu Duren Huijala. The lost person has come home. Huan Meiyou, Marcus replied, his Mandarin rusty but earnest. Dan wo zheng zai xuexi huiqu de lu. Not yet, but I'm learning the way back. May smiled. Na woman iqi zhou ba. Then we'll walk it together. There's one more thing, Marcus said, standing up and pulling an envelope from his jacket. Rosa, this is your new contract. You're being promoted to residential property manager for all my holdings. It comes with a salary increase and full benefits, including tuition assistance for Sophie's education. Rosa opened the envelope with shaking hands, then looked up at Marcus with tears streaming down her face. I don't understand. Why? Because Sophie taught me in 5 minutes what I'd forgotten in 16 years, Marcus said simply. And because your mother knew my grandmother. Because kindness matters more than cruelty. Because, his voice caught slightly, because I want to be someone my grandmother would be proud of again. Sophie suddenly stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around Marcus's legs in an unexpected hug. He froze, unsure what to do. He couldn't remember the last time he'd hugged anyone. You're not lost anymore, Sophie whispered. You're right here. And standing in that narrow hallway of a queen's walk-up, surrounded by Chinese language books and the smell of dumplings and a 6-year-old's fierce certainty, Marcus Chen felt something he hadn't felt in 16 years. He felt like he was finally standing on solid ground. But what Marcus didn't know, what no one in that hallway knew, was that Grandma May was keeping a secret. A secret about his grandmother, about promises made decades ago, about a connection between their families that went far deeper than friendship. A secret that, when revealed, would change everything Marcus thought he knew about where he came from, and why he'd been running for so long. 3 weeks passed, and Marcus Chen's life transformed in ways he couldn't have imagined. He began each morning not with stock reports, but with a Mandarin lesson from Dr. Lin via video call. The words came back slowly at first, like water breaking through a dam, hesitant then rushing. His tongue remembered shapes his mind had forgotten. Every Saturday, Marcus did something that shocked his entire social circle. He spent the day in Queens. Not at some trendy restaurant or art gallery, but in Rosa's small apartment, sitting at Grandma May's kitchen table, while Sophie practiced her characters, and May taught them both about idioms, proverbs, and the stories woven into the Chinese language. Each character is a whole world, May explained one Saturday afternoon, showing them the character xiang, to think, to miss. See? It combines tree and eye and heart. The ancients believed thinking was like a tree in your heart that you look at with your inner eye. Sophie had drawn a picture of this in her notebook, a heart with a tree growing inside it, and an eye watching over both. Marcus found himself doing the same in his own notebook, something he hadn't done since business school. The scholarship fund had launched to unexpected media attention. Tech billionaire returns to roots, read the headline in the New York Times. Marcus had given exactly one interview, keeping it brief. A 6-year-old reminded me that success without heritage is just emptiness with expensive furniture. The quote had gone viral. His phone had exploded with calls from other Chinese-American business leaders, many admitting they'd done the same thing. Anglicized their names, distanced themselves from their roots, climbed the ladder by cutting ties to the ground. But today, this particular Saturday in early March, something felt different. Marcus arrived at the apartment at 10 a.m. as usual, carrying a bag of fresh vegetables from the Chinese market in Flushing. Bok choy, gailan, lotus root. May had been teaching him to cook traditional dishes, claiming that cooking was another language of love. Sophie opened the door, but her usual bright energy was subdued. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Souffle, Zemola. Sophie, what's wrong? Marcus asked, his concern immediate. Grandma May isn't feeling well, Sophie said quietly in English. Mama said she needs to rest. Rosa appeared behind Sophie, her face drawn with worry. Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry. My mother had chest pains this morning. The doctor is coming in an hour. Maybe today isn't a good day. What can I do? Marcus set down the vegetables. Do you need a better doctor? I can make calls. No, Rosa said quickly. Dr. Huang is very good. He's been treating her for years. It's her heart. She has a condition, but she doesn't like to worry anyone. Marcus felt ice flood his veins. How long has she had this condition? 5 years, Rosa admitted. Since my father died. The stress made it worse, but she refuses to slow down. Says she has too much to do, too many people who need her. Before Marcus could respond, May's voice called out weakly from the bedroom. Rang Chenming Jinlai. Let Chenming come in. Rosa hesitated, then nodded. She wants to see you, but please don't tire her out. Marcus entered the small bedroom that smelled of medicinal herbs and jasmine. May lay propped up on pillows, looking smaller and more fragile than he'd ever seen her. But her eyes were still sharp, still seeing everything. Guan Men, close the door, she said softly. Marcus did as instructed, then pulled a chair close to the bed. You should have told me you were sick. I'm 73 years old, Chen Ming. Everyone my age is sick with something. May smiled slightly. Besides, I'm not sick. I'm just running out of time. Don't say that. Shh. May raised a trembling hand. I need to tell you something. Something I promised your grandmother I would tell you if you ever found your way back. I didn't think I'd live to see it. But here you are. Marcus leaned forward, his heart hammering. What promise? May took a breath that seemed to cost her. Your grandmother and I weren't just friends, we were sisters. The room tilted. What? Not by blood. May continued, her voice gaining strength as if the secret had been weighing her down. But by choice, by circumstance, by survival. We came to America together in 1968, 2 young women with nothing but dreams and determination. We worked in the same garment factory in Chinatown, lived in the same boarding house, shared the same struggles. Marcus's mind reeled. His grandmother had never mentioned any of this. Why didn't she tell me? Because I asked her not to. May's eyes glistened with tears. When I married Rosa's father, Eduardo Santos, your grandmother was so happy for me. But your grandfather, she paused, choosing her words carefully. He was traditional. He thought I was betraying our culture by marrying a Filipino man. He forbade your grandmother from seeing me. She listened to him. Marcus couldn't believe it. His grandmother had been the strongest woman he knew. For a time, May said. She had to. Your father was young. They needed your grandfather's support. But we found ways. Secret meetings at the market. Letters passed through mutual friends. When you were born, Chen Ming, your grandmother snuck out to show you to me. You were 3 days old and she put you in my arms and said, "This is your nephew, even if the world doesn't know it." Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now and he didn't care. I had an aunt. All this time. Your grandmother made me promise something that day. May continued, gripping Marcus's hand with surprising strength. She said if you ever lost your way, if you ever forgot who you were, I should wait. Wait and watch. And if you ever found your way back, I should tell you the truth. What truth? May reached under her pillow and pulled out a faded photograph. In it, 2 young women stood in front of the Statue of Liberty, arms around each other, their faces bright with hope and determination. Marcus recognized his grandmother instantly. The other woman was clearly a young May. "Turn it over," May whispered. Marcus flipped the photograph. On the back, in his grandmother's distinctive handwriting, were words in Chinese: 梅和莲，永远的姐妹，我们的孩子就是我们的孩子。1968年7月4日 May and Lian, sisters forever. Our children are each other's children. July 4th, 1968. Our children are each other's children, Marcus read aloud, his voice breaking. That means Sophie is your family, May said softly. Not by blood, but by promise, by choice. Just as your grandmother and I were sisters by choice. Marcus looked up at May, this woman he'd known for only 3 weeks, but who had somehow become essential to his life. Does Rosa know? Not everything. She knows her grandmother and yours were close friends, but not about the promise. Not about how deep the bond went. May coughed, and Marcus quickly poured water from the bedside pitcher. After she drank, May continued. Your grandmother told me something else before she died. Rosa called me from the hospital, and I went even though your grandfather had passed by then and there was no one to forbid it. Your grandmother was unconscious, but I held her hand and told her about Sophie, about how smart she was, how she loved learning Mandarin. And your grandmother opened her eyes one last time and said, "Gaosu Chen Ming. Tell Chen Ming." Then she was gone. Tell me what? That language is more than words. It's blood and memory in all the people who came before us. That when you speak Mandarin, you speak with your grandmother's voice, and her grandmother's voice, back through generations. And when you teach it to the next generation, you give them a gift more valuable than any fortune you could build. A sob broke from Marcus's chest. I wasn't there when she died. I was closing a deal in Tokyo. I chose money over. Stop. May's voice was firm despite her weakness. Your grandmother understood. She was proud of your success. But she also knew that success without connection is just loneliness wearing expensive clothes. She wanted you to have both. She wanted you to build your empire, but remember your foundation. Through the thin bedroom door, Marcus could hear Sophie in the living room, practicing her characters aloud. Her voice was clear and careful, shaping each syllable with the precision May had taught her. Sophie doesn't know any of this either, Marcus asked. She knows she has a great-grandmother's spirit watching over her, May said with a small smile. I tell her stories about Grandma Leon in heaven, but she doesn't know that Grandma Leon was your grandmother too. Should we tell her? May's eyes grew distant. That's not my choice anymore. The promise is fulfilled. I've told you the truth. What you do with it is up to you. There was a soft knock on the door and Dr. Huang arrived, an elderly Chinese man with gentle hands and a concerned expression. Marcus excused himself, his mind spinning with revelations. In the living room, Sophie sat at the small table, her notebook open. When she saw Marcus's tear-stained face, she immediately got up and hugged him without a word, the way children do when they understand sadness, even if they don't understand its source. Grandma May will be okay, Sophie whispered. She promised to teach me about the Moon Festival this year. She always keeps her promises. Marcus hugged her back. This 6-year-old girl who was, by promise and love if not by blood, his family. Did your Grandma May ever tell you about promises between sisters? She said the strongest families are the ones we choose, Sophie replied, pulling back to look at him seriously. Not just the ones we're born into, is that what you mean? Exactly that. Marcus brushed a strand of hair from her face. Sophie, how would you feel about having an uncle? Not a real uncle, but someone who made a promise to take care of you, like family. Sophie's eyes widened with understanding beyond her years. You want to be my uncle? If you'll have me. Sophie considered this with the gravity of a child making an important decision. Then she smiled, and it was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Okay, but uncles have to come to birthday parties. Mine is in 2 months. I'll be there, Marcus promised. With the biggest cake you've ever seen. Rosa appeared from the bedroom, her eyes also red. The doctor says she needs to rest for a week. No stress, no excitement. I'll have to take time off work. No, you won't, Marcus interrupted gently. I'm hiring a private nurse. 24-hour care if necessary. And Rosa, there's something else. Something May just told me. Over the next hour, as Dr. Huang worked in the bedroom and Sophie practiced her characters, Marcus told Rosa everything. About the promise, the photograph, the sisterhood between their grandmothers that transcended culture and family objection. Rosa cried, then she laughed, then she cried again. All this time, she whispered, I thought we were so alone. After my father died, after my husband left, I thought Sophie and I had no one but my mother. And now you're telling me we have family? By promise and choice, Marcus confirmed, if you want it. Want it? Rosa grabbed his hand. Mr. Chen, Marcus, do you know what it's like to feel like you're drowning and someone throws you not just a rope, but tells you you've had a boat all along? Sophie looked up from her notebook. What boat, Mama? The boat called family, mija, Rosa said, pulling Sophie into her lap. The boat that Uncle Marcus just reminded us we've been sailing in all along. Uncle Marcus, Sophie tested the words, then giggled. That sounds funny, but I like it. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange, quiet peace. Dr. Huang confirmed that May's condition was stable but warned that her heart was weakening. Months, maybe a year, he told Marcus and Rosa privately. Make them count. As evening approached and Marcus prepared to leave, May called him back to her bedroom one more time. She looked exhausted but peaceful, as if sharing the secret had lifted a great weight. One more thing, she said as Marcus sat beside her. In the top drawer of my dresser there's a red envelope. Take it. Marcus opened the drawer and found the envelope, decorated with gold characters for longevity and happiness. Inside were documents, old, official-looking papers. What are these? Deeds, May said. To a small property in Flushing that your grandmother and I bought together in 1972. We worked double shifts for 2 years to save for it. We were going to open a language school together, teach Chinese to immigrant children so they wouldn't forget their roots. What happened? Life happened. My Eduardo got sick. Your grandmother's husband forbade it. The property sat empty. Then we rented it out to help make ends meet. But we never sold it. We kept it for our children. For you and Rosa. Marcus stared at the documents. You're giving me... I'm giving you a choice, May interrupted. The property is worth money now, probably a lot. You could sell it, split the proceeds, or... Her eyes gleamed with the hint of the younger woman in the photograph. You could honor 2 old women's dream and finally open that language school. Teach children like Sophie that their heritage is a treasure, not a burden to shed. Marcus's throat was too tight to speak. He simply nodded. Good, May said, settling back into her pillows. Now go home. Come back next Saturday. And Chen Ming? Wear the jade pendant. It makes your grandmother smile, wherever she is. Marcus stood to leave, but paused at the door. Auntie May? May's eyes filled with tears at the title. Yes, nephew. Thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for finding your way home. Outside, the March evening was cold and clear. Marcus walked to his car slowly, the red envelope in his jacket pocket, the jade pendant warm against his chest. His phone had 17 missed calls, all from work. There was probably a crisis that needed his attention, a deal that required his presence. None of it mattered. What mattered was that he'd found something he didn't even know he'd lost. A family that had been waiting for him all along, connected not by blood, but by something stronger, by promises kept across decades, by languages that carried memory. by an old woman's patient love and a 6-year-old girl's fearless truth. Marcus looked up at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "I'm not lost anymore, Grandma," he whispered in Mandarin. "I found my way back." And somewhere, he was certain, his grandmother was smiling. But the story was far from over, because in his office, sitting on his desk, was a letter that had arrived that afternoon. A letter from Beijing. A letter that would reveal one final truth about his grandmother, about May, about promises made long ago in a language that never forgets. A truth that would test everything Marcus thought he'd learned about family, forgiveness, and the price of coming home. The letter sat unopened on Marcus's desk for 3 days. It was thick, official-looking, with red stamps and Chinese characters he could now partially read. The return address was Beijing, from a law firm called Chen Shi Fa Lu Shi Wusuo, Chen Family Legal Affairs. Marcus had stared at it every morning, then buried himself in work to avoid confronting whatever truth it contained. He'd spent those 3 days transforming the Flushing property into a vision. Architects, contractors, education consultants, all marshaled to create the language school his grandmother and May had dreamed of 40 years ago. But the letter haunted him. On Thursday evening, as Manhattan's lights flickered to life below his office windows, Marcus finally called the one person he'd been avoiding since this journey began. His father. Raymond Chen answered on the third ring. "Marcus." His voice carried surprise and something else, hope maybe, or fear. "Is everything all right?" "Dad, I need to ask you about Grandma." Marcus's throat was tight. "About her past in China, before she came to America." Silence stretched across the line. Then, "Why are you asking this now? Your grandmother has been gone 12 years. Because I've learned some things, met some people, and I got a letter from Beijing that I'm afraid to open." More silence. Marcus could hear his father breathing, could almost see him in the Flushing apartment, probably sitting in the same chair where he'd sat for 30 years. "Your grandmother never talked about China," Raymond finally said. "She always said America was her home now and the past should stay buried. But there was a past. There's always a past, son. The question is whether digging it up helps or just creates more pain." Marcus looked at the letter. "I met May Santos." His father's sharp intake of breath was audible. "May is alive? You knew her?" "Of course I knew her. She was at our house constantly when I was young before—" Raymond stopped abruptly. "Before Grandpa forbade it," Marcus finished. "I know, Dad. May told me everything, about the promise, about how they were sisters." "Then you know more than I do," Raymond said quietly. "Your grandfather never explained why May stopped coming. Just said she'd made her choice and we'd made ours. Your grandmother cried for weeks, but she never disobeyed him. That wasn't how marriage worked back then." Marcus felt a surge of anger at a grandfather he'd never known. The man had died before Marcus was born. He was wrong. He was traditional, and scared, and trying to hold on to something he felt slipping away in this new country. Raymond's voice carried decades of complexity. "It's easy to judge from where you stand now, Marcus. But imagine being in a foreign land, watching your culture dissolve, your language fade in your own son's mouth." He was wrong, but he was also human. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Wasn't that exactly what he'd done? Watched his own heritage dissolve, deliberately erased his grandmother's language from his life, chosen assimilation over identity? "Dad, I need to know about the letter. Do you have any idea what it could be about?" Raymond was quiet for so long, Marcus thought the connection had dropped. Then, "Open it, I'll stay on the line." Marcus's hands shook as he broke the seal. Inside were multiple documents, all in Chinese with English translations attached. He scanned the first page and his vision blurred. "Marcus, what does it say?" "It's from a law firm in Beijing representing the Chen family estate." Marcus's voice was hollow. "Apparently, Grandma had family there, siblings, property, and—" He stopped, reading ahead in disbelief. "And what?" "And she never told anyone because she thought she'd betrayed them by leaving China and never returning. She sent money when she could, but after she married Grandpa and he cut off contact with anyone who encouraged American dreams over Chinese duty, she lost touch. The last of her siblings died 3 months ago and left everything to her, except she was already gone. So it comes to you, Raymond said softly. Marcus flipped through the pages. Property deeds, bank statements, photographs of people he'd never met but whose faces carried echoes of his own. And then, on the last page, a letter handwritten in Chinese. The translation was clipped to it. "There's a letter from her youngest brother," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "Written before he died. It says," he had to stop and compose himself. "It says, 'Tell my sister Leon I forgive her. Tell her I understand why she stayed in America. Tell her I'm proud of what she built there, of the grandson who became so successful we read about him even here. Tell her to come home one more time, to see where she began, to remember who she was before America. But if she's already gone to join our ancestors, tell her grandson instead." Marcus couldn't continue. Tears were streaming down his face, dripping onto the expensive desk that suddenly seemed obscene in its opulence. "Marcus," his father's voice was thick with emotion, "I didn't know. She never said. She carried so much alone, Dad, so much shame, so much guilt. And for what? For wanting a better life, for choosing love and family and a future. For being human," Raymond said. "For making impossible choices in an impossible situation. Your grandmother was strong, Marcus, but she wasn't made of stone. She felt every loss, carried every regret. But she also built something beautiful. She raised me, helped raise you. She worked her fingers to the bone so we could have opportunities she never had." Marcus looked at the photographs of his grandmother's siblings, faces weathered by hard Chinese rural life, but smiling in their formal portraits. Uncles and aunts he'd never known existed. A whole family tree he'd been cut off from by circumstance and silence. "The letter says there's a house," Marcus continued, his voice steadier now. "The family home in a village outside Beijing. It's mine now if I want it. If I'm willing to go claim it." "Are you?" The question hung in the air. Was he willing to go to China? To walk the halls his grandmother had walked as a girl? To meet cousins he'd never known? To speak the language she'd spoken before English reshaped her tongue? "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "But not alone. Dad, come with me. Let's go together. Let's bring Grandma home, even if it's just in our hearts." Raymond was crying now. Marcus could hear it in his breathing. "I'm 68 years old, son. I haven't been on a plane in 20 years. Then it's time. And Dad, I want to bring Sophie too. And Rosa. And May, if she's strong enough. The Santos family. Why? Because they're our family. Because Grandma wanted it that way. Because a promise made between sisters 40 years ago is still binding." Marcus looked out at Manhattan, at the city his grandmother had navigated with courage he was only beginning to understand. "Grandma kept her promises, Dad. Even the ones that broke her heart. It's time we honored them." The next Saturday, Marcus arrived at the Queen's apartment with news that would change everything. May was sitting up in bed, stronger than she'd been the previous week. Sophie was curled beside her, reading from a new storybook Marcus had brought the week before. Rosa was in the kitchen making dumplings, and the smell transported Marcus instantly to childhood. He'd started joining her during these cooking sessions, learning the recipes his grandmother had known by heart. "Uncle Marcus!" Sophie jumped up and ran to hug him. The title had stuck immediately, feeling more natural than his given name. Marcus hugged her back, then went to May's bedside and kissed her forehead, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a month ago, but now felt as natural as breathing. "Woyo xiaoxi Mei ma, I have news, Auntie May," he said in Mandarin, his accent improving but still imperfect. May's eyes sharpened with interest. "How xiaoxi hai shi pi xiaoxi? Good news or bad news?" "Both," Marcus admitted, switching to English so Rosa and Sophie could understand. He pulled out the letter and photographs, spreading them on the bed. For the next hour he told them everything. About the family in China, the inheritance, the brother's final message of forgiveness. About the plan to go to Beijing, to bring his father, to see where his grandmother had begun her journey. May held the photographs with trembling hands, tears flowing freely. "Leon talked about them sometimes," she whispered. "Late at night when we worked together in the factory. She'd tell me about her village, her brothers, the persimmon tree in their courtyard. She missed them every day of her life. Then help me honor that, Marcus said. Come to China with us. You and Leon started this journey together in 1968. Let's complete it together now. Marcus, I can't possibly. Maid gestured at her frail body. The doctor said you have months, maybe a year. Let's make them count. Marcus took her hand. Besides, I already called a medical travel service. They'll provide everything you need, oxygen, nurses, whatever it takes. May, my grandmother never got to go back, but you can. For both of you. Rosa appeared in the doorway, flour dusting her hands. Mama, if you want to go, we'll make it happen. Sophie climbed back onto the bed. Please come, Grandma May. I want to see where your stories come from, where you and Grandma Leon learned to be sisters. May looked at each of them, Marcus, Rosa, Sophie, this family she'd helped bring together through patience and love. Then she looked at the photograph of two young women in front of the Statue of Liberty, full of hope and dreams. Leon would want this, May finally said. She'd want us all to go together, to close the circle she couldn't close herself. Then it's settled, Marcus said. We leave in 3 weeks. That gives me time to handle the medical arrangements, visas, everything. Sophie bounced excitedly. Can I bring my language books? I want to practice with real Chinese people. You can bring whatever you want, Sophie, Marcus said, laughing. But trust me, the real Chinese people will be more interested in practicing English with you. Then I'll teach them, Sophie declared with the confidence only a 6-year-old could muster. As the afternoon wore on, they planned. Marcus pulled out his laptop and showed them pictures of Beijing, the Forbidden City, the Great Wall, the traditional hutongs that reminded May of her childhood. He found the village where his grandmother had been born, a small dot on the map 2 hours outside the capital. We'll spend a week in Beijing, Marcus explained. See the sights, let Sophie experience the culture. Then we'll go to the village, meet the family, see the house. Finally, we'll visit May's hometown too. My village is gone, May said quietly. They built a factory over it in the 90s. Then we'll visit where it was, Marcus insisted. We'll stand on that ground and remember. That's what this trip is about. Remembering, honoring, completing the journey. Rosa wiped tears from her eyes. I can't believe this is happening. A month ago we were just getting by, day to day. And now we're family, Marcus finished. Going home together. That night after leaving the apartment, Marcus sat in his car for a long time before starting the engine. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts to a name he hadn't called in years. Jennifer Wu, his Harvard roommate who'd gone on to become a documentary filmmaker. She answered on the second ring. Marcus Chen. To what do I owe this blast from the past? Jen, how would you feel about filming a documentary? About what? About promises kept, journeys completed, and a 6-year-old girl who taught a billionaire what really matters. Marcus smiled. And about 2 women who became sisters in America and changed their families forever. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. This sounds personal. It is. Very. Good. Personal stories are the best ones. When do we start? The 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Marcus discovered that moving mountains was much easier when you had unlimited resources and genuine motivation. Medical clearances, travel visas, hotel accommodations, a private jet chartered to accommodate May's needs. All of it arranged with the efficiency that had built his empire, but now in service of something that actually mattered. He'd also done something else. He'd called his estranged aunt in California, his grandmother's sister-in-law whom the family had lost touch with after his grandfather's death. Aunt Linda had cried on the phone for 20 minutes, then immediately booked a flight to join them. The scholarship fund had officially launched, with Sophie cutting the ribbon at the ceremony. The media had eaten it up. 6-year-old prodigy inspires billionaire's change of heart, read one headline. Marcus had hated the attention, but endured it because the fund was already changing lives. 15 students had been awarded scholarships in the first round alone. The Flushing property was under renovation. Marcus visited the site daily, watching as the space transformed into bright classrooms, a library filled with books in multiple languages, a community center where families could gather. The sign that would hang out front was already designed. The Leon and May Language Academy, where heritage meets future. On the day before their departure, Marcus visited his grandmother's grave for the first time in 12 years. The cemetery in Queens was peaceful, shaded by old trees. He'd brought flowers and incense and knelt by the simple headstone that read, Lian Chen, beloved mother and grandmother. 我要回家了, Nai. I'm going home, Grandma, he said in Mandarin, his pronunciation much better now. 我要看你长大的地方，我要见你的家人。我终于明白你一直试图教我的东西。I'm going to see where you grew up. I'm going to meet your family. I finally understand what you were trying to teach me all along. The wind rustled through the trees and Marcus swore he could feel her presence, her approval, her love that had never wavered even when he'd turned his back on everything she'd tried to give him. I'm bringing May with me, he continued. And her family. Our family. We're completing the journey you started, Grandma. We're bringing you home. He placed the flowers on the grave and lit the incense, watching the smoke curl up toward the sky. And in that moment, Marcus Chen felt something he hadn't felt in 16 years. He felt complete. The next morning, they gathered at the private terminal at JFK. Marcus's father, Raymond, looking nervous but determined in a new suit Marcus had bought him. Aunt Linda, clutching a photo album of family pictures. Rosa and Sophie, the little girl vibrating with excitement in a red dress that May had insisted brought good luck for travel. And May herself, in a wheelchair but alert and smiling, a blanket embroidered with phoenixes across her lap. Jennifer Wu and her small film crew were there too, cameras ready to document every moment. Everyone ready? Marcus asked, looking at this unlikely family he'd assembled. Sophie raised her hand. Uncle Marcus, can I say something before we go? Of course. Sophie stood on her tiptoes and spoke clearly, first in English, then in careful Mandarin. Grandma Lian and Grandma May, we're keeping your promise. We're going home together, and we're going to make you proud. There wasn't a dry eye among them. As they boarded the plane, Marcus looked back at New York's skyline one last time. Somewhere in those towers was his office, his empire, the life he'd built by forgetting who he was. But the man boarding this plane was different from the man who'd insulted a 6-year-old girl 6 weeks ago. That man had been lost, hollow, successful, but empty. This man was Chen Ming again. Was Marcus too. Was both and neither and everything in between. Was finally, after all these years, truly home. The plane's engines roared to life. Sophie pressed her face against the window, watching New York disappear beneath the clouds. May dozed peacefully, her hand clasped in Rosa's. Raymond and Linda shared quiet memories of the grandmother they'd both loved. Jennifer's cameras captured it all. And Marcus, looking at these people, his family, his past, his future all woven together, knew that whatever waited in China, whatever truths or challenges or emotions lay ahead, they would face them together. Because that's what family does. Even family you have to find your way back to. Even family built on promises kept across oceans and decades. Even family that starts with a 6-year-old girl's fearless honesty and an old woman's patient love. Especially that kind of family. The best kind of family, the only kind that really matters. Beijing welcomed them with spring rain and the scent of blooming magnolias. The 15-hour flight had been surprisingly peaceful. May slept most of the way under medical supervision. Sophie had practiced her Chinese characters with unwavering focus, and Marcus had sat between his father and aunt, listening to stories about his grandmother he'd never heard before. She used to sing while she cooked. Aunt Linda remembered, her eyes distant. Old folk songs from her village. Your grandfather hated it, said it made her sound like a peasant, so she only sang when he wasn't home. Raymond nodded. I remember. I'd come home from school and hear her voice from the kitchen, and I knew Dad was working late. Those were always the best dinners. Marcus absorbed these fragments of a woman he'd thought he knew but was only now beginning to understand. Every story revealed another layer, another sacrifice, another quiet dignity in the face of impossible choices. The hotel Marcus had chosen was in a traditional Hutong neighborhood, renovated to modern standards but retaining the architectural soul of old Beijing. May had cried when she saw it, the gray brick walls and red lanterns triggering memories of her own childhood. This is what Beijing used to look like everywhere, she whispered as they helped her into the wheelchair. before the skyscrapers, before the highways. This is the Beijing Lian, and I dreamed about on cold nights in New York. Their first day was spent slowly, accommodating May's needs. They visited Beihai Park, where willows draped over ancient stone bridges and elderly people practiced Tai Chi in the morning mist. Sophie was enchanted by everything: the sound of erhu music floating from a pavilion, the intricate paintings on the temple ceilings, the way strangers smiled when she spoke to them in careful Mandarin. 你的中文说得很好. Your Chinese is very good, an old woman told Sophie at the park, and the little girl beamed with pride. 我奶奶教我的, my grandmother taught me, Sophie replied, gesturing to May. The old woman and May started talking, and within minutes they'd discovered they'd both grown up in similar villages, had both made dumplings the same way, had both left everything behind for love. Marcus watched this exchange and understood something profound. His grandmother's story wasn't unique. It was one thread in a vast tapestry of immigration, sacrifice, and survival. Millions of women had made similar choices, carried similar burdens, built similar bridges between worlds. On the third day, they visited the Great Wall. The medical team had cleared it, and they'd arranged for a chairlift to carry May to a quieter section, where she could see the ancient stones snaking across green mountains without exhausting herself. At the top, with Beijing sprawling in the hazy distance, May asked them to gather close. Jennifer's cameras captured what happened next. Leon and I made a promise to each other in 1968, May began, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. We promised that if we ever made it back to China, we'd come together. She never got the chance. But I'm here now, and I'm not alone. She looked at each of them, Marcus, Raymond, Linda, Rosa, Sophie. I'm here with her family. With our family. And I need you all to make me a promise now. Anything, Marcus said immediately. Promise me you'll remember that family isn't just blood. It's choice. It's showing up. It's keeping your word even when it's hard. May pulled a small silk pouch from her jacket and opened it. Inside was a jade pendant identical to the one Marcus wore. Leon gave this to me the day she married your grandfather, Marcus. She said, even if we can't see each other, we'll always be connected. I want you to have it. Marcus took the pendant with trembling hands. 2 pieces of jade carved from the same stone, separated for 50 years, finally reunited. Give one to Sophie when she's older, May continued. Tell her about 2 women who refused to let oceans or obstacles break their bond. Tell her that's what real strength looks like. Sophie, understanding the solemnity of the moment even if she didn't grasp all its nuances, stepped forward. I promise, Grandma May. I'll remember everything. That evening, back at the hotel, Marcus received a call from the village where his grandmother had been born. The family was ready to meet them tomorrow. His cousin Chen Wei would be there to welcome them. 我们等了很久. We've waited a long time, Chen Wei said in Mandarin. 欢迎回家, Chen Ming. Welcome home, Chen Ming. Marcus barely slept that night. At 4 a.m. he found his father sitting in the hotel courtyard looking at the stars. Can't sleep either? Raymond asked. Marcus sat beside him. Dad, do you ever regret the choices you made? Staying in America, not pushing harder to stay connected with Grandma's family? Raymond was quiet for a long time. Every day. But regret and learning aren't the same thing. I regret the lost time, the missed connections. But I've learned that it's never too late to start building bridges. You've taught me that. Me? I'm the one who spent 16 years running away. And you're the one who found the courage to run back. Raymond put his arm around Marcus's shoulders, a gesture of affection they'd rarely shared. Your grandmother would be so proud of you, son, not because you're successful, because you're finally brave enough to be vulnerable. The village was 2 hours outside Beijing, down increasingly narrow roads until they traded the van for a smaller vehicle that could navigate the country lanes. The landscape transformed from urban sprawl to agricultural patchwork, rice paddies and vegetable plots, stone houses with curved roofs, chickens scratching in dusty yards. When they arrived at the Chen family home, at least 30 people were waiting. Marcus felt his heart hammer as faces turned toward them, faces that carried echoes of his own features, his grandmother's eyes, his father's jawline, generations of shared DNA expressed in subtle variations. An elderly man stepped forward, leaning on a cane but moving with determination. Chen Wei, Marcus realized. His grandmother's youngest brother's son. His cousin. Chen Ming, Chen Wei said, and then did something that broke Marcus completely. He bowed deeply, a gesture of respect that seemed to contain 50 years of separation and longing. Marcus returned the bow, tears streaming openly down his face. 对不起，我们花了这么长时间. I'm sorry it took us so long, he managed to say. 你在这里，这就是最重要的. You're here, that's what matters, Chen Wei replied. What followed was a feast that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Round tables set up in the courtyard under the ancient persimmon tree his grandmother had described to Maid decades ago. Dish after dish appeared. Hand-pulled noodles, braised pork belly, stir-fried greens, dumplings made with the same technique that had crossed the ocean with Li and Chen and been passed down through Rosa's kitchen to Sophie's eager hands. Sophie was the star of the gathering. She charmed everyone with her Mandarin, her curiosity, her fearless questions. Children who'd been shy at first soon surrounded her, and within an hour she was teaching them English words while they taught her Chinese games. 她就像Lian小时候. She's just like Lian when she was young, an old woman told Marcus, wiping tears from her weathered face. Tongyang de Jingshan, Tongyang de Guangmang. Same spirit, same light. As the sun began to set, Chen Wei took Marcus aside and led him to a small room in the house. Inside, preserved with obvious care, were Lian Chen's belongings from before she'd left for America. A wooden trunk, a few faded photographs, a silk scarf embroidered with peonies. She left these behind because she could only take one bag, Chen Wei explained. My father kept them his whole life, hoping she'd come back for them. When he knew he was dying, he made me promise to keep them for her son or grandson. Marcus opened the trunk with shaking hands. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in Chinese dated from 1968 through the early 1990s. Letters his grandmother had sent, filled with descriptions of her life in America, her struggles, her joys, her undying love for the family she'd left behind. At the bottom of the trunk was a photograph Marcus had never seen before. His grandmother as a teenager standing in front of this very house laughing with her arms around her siblings. Young, hopeful, with no idea of the journey that awaited her. She never forgot you, Marcus said to Chen Wei. She carried you all in her heart every day. And we carried her, Chen Wei replied. That's what family does. That night they stayed in the village. The family insisted, setting up sleeping arrangements in various houses, making sure May had the most comfortable room despite her protests. Around a fire in the courtyard, with stars blazing overhead in a way they never did in New York, the stories flowed. Stories of Lian Chen as a girl, mischievous, bright, determined. Stories of hard times during the Cultural Revolution, of how the family had survived, of changes and challenges and small victories. And stories from America, Marcus, Raymond, and Linda sharing their own memories, weaving their experiences back into the family tapestry. Sophie fell asleep in Marcus's lap, clutching the jade pendant May had given her earlier. Rosa sat with the village women, finding common ground in the universal language of motherhood despite the linguistic barriers. Jennifer's cameras captured everything, but she'd long since stopped being a documentarian and had become part of the story herself. May sat in a place of honor, speaking with the elders about old times, old songs, old recipes that had crossed the ocean and remained stubbornly unchanged. At one point she began singing, a folk song about leaving home and dreaming of return. One by one the village women joined in, their voices creating a harmony that transcended the decades of separation. Marcus listened to those voices and understood what his grandmother had tried to teach him. Language wasn't just words. It was memory made audible. It was connection made tangible. It was home made portable enough to carry across oceans while still anchoring you to the ground where you began. On their last night in China, they returned to Beijing for one final gathering. Marcus had arranged for a private room in a restaurant overlooking the Forbidden City. The family from the village had come, along with May's relatives they'd discovered still living in Beijing, and Raymond's old school friends who'd managed to track him down after hearing about the visit. The room buzzed with conversation in Mandarin, English, and everything in between. Sophie moved between groups like a small ambassador, translating, connecting, building bridges with the fearlessness of children who haven't yet learned that some things are supposed to be difficult. As dinner ended and tea was served, Marcus stood to speak. The room quieted immediately. 30 years ago, he began in Mandarin, then switched to English for those who needed it, with Chen Wei translating back. My grandmother left this city with nothing but dreams and determination. She spent her life building a future for her family in America, but she never stopped being Chinese in her heart. She never stopped loving the people and places she left behind. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I spent 16 years trying to erase that heritage. I changed my name, forgot my language, turned my back on everything she tried to teach me. I thought success meant becoming someone new. But a 6-year-old girl taught me the truth. Success means remembering who you are while becoming who you're meant to be. Marcus looked at Sophie, who sat between May and Rosa, her eyes bright with attention. Sophie reminded me that language is a bridge, not a wall. That heritage is a treasure, not a burden. That family is defined by love and choice, not just blood. He raised his teacup. So tonight I want to honor 2 women who understood this long before I did. To Lian Chen, my grandmother, who carried 2 worlds in her heart and never let either one go. And to May Santos, who kept a promise for 50 years and brought us all home. Ganbei. Ganbei. Cheers. The room chorused, cups raised high. May stood with Rosa's help and everyone quieted again. I'm 73 years old, she said in Mandarin, her voice clear and strong. I've seen a lot of life, crossed a lot of bridges. But this, she gestured around the room, this is the bridge Lian and I always dreamed of building. A bridge where East meets West, where family transcends borders, where love is stronger than distance. She pulled out the photograph of 2 young women in front of the Statue of Liberty and held it up. We were so young then, so hopeful, so scared. We didn't know if we'd make it, if America would accept us, if we'd ever see home again. May's voice broke slightly. Lian never did, but in a way she's here tonight, in her son, her family, her legacy, in every person in this room who chose connection over division. She turned to Sophie. Xiao Sufei, Guolai. Little Sophie, come here. Sophie hopped off her chair and went to May's side. May knelt down with difficulty, bringing herself eye level with the child who had started it all. You changed everything, May said softly in English. You spoke truth when it was hard. You built a bridge with just a few words. Never stop doing that, okay? Never stop being brave enough to see what others miss, to say what needs to be said, to love without conditions. Sophie hugged May tightly. I promise, Grandma May. I'll always remember. As the evening wound down and people began to say their goodbyes, Marcus found himself standing by the window with his father, looking out at the illuminated Forbidden City. Your mother would have loved this, Marcus said quietly. Raymond nodded. She did love it, every day of her life. She just couldn't show it the way she wanted to. He turned to Marcus. But you've done something she never could. You've healed the breach. You've brought the family back together. That's a gift beyond measure. I had help, Marcus said, looking at Sophie, who was now teaching the village children a clapping game. A very small, very wise helper. 2 months later, back in New York, Marcus stood in front of the Lian and May Language Academy on its opening day. The building gleamed with fresh paint, the windows filled with colorful decorations made by the first students. The sign hung proudly above the door, with characters in both English and Chinese. Over 200 people had gathered for the ribbon cutting. Students, parents, community members, and reporters covering the story of the billionaire who'd found his way home through a child's honesty. Sophie stood beside Marcus, wearing a traditional Chinese dress called a qipao that May had given her. The jade pendant hung around her neck, catching the morning sun. At 6 years old, she was the youngest scholarship recipient and the school's official bridge builder, a title the board had created specifically for her. May sat in a wheelchair in the front row, her health declining but her spirit undimmed. Rosa stood behind her, one hand on her mother's shoulder. Raymond and Linda had flown in from across the country. Chen Wei had come from China, bringing 3 of the village elders. Marcus took the microphone, and the crowd quieted. This building represents a dream that started 50 years ago between two women who refused to let circumstance define their limits, he began. But it also represents something else, the power of a single moment of truth to change everything. He looked at Sophie. 6 months ago, a little girl responded to my cruelty with courage. She could have stayed silent, could have let my ignorance pass unchallenged, but she chose to speak up, in a language I thought I'd left behind. And in doing so, she gave me back something I didn't even know I'd lost. Myself. Sophie smiled up at him, and Marcus felt his heart expand with a love so profound it almost hurt. This school will teach languages, Marcus continued, but more importantly, it will teach what Sophie taught me, that our heritage is not something to escape or erase, but something to embrace and share. That being multilingual means being multi-hearted, that every language we speak adds another dimension to our humanity. He handed the microphone to Sophie, who took it with both hands. My grandma May says words can build bridges or walls, Sophie said clearly, her voice amplified across the crowd. I think we should build bridges, big ones, strong ones, beautiful ones. Bridges where everyone can meet in the middle and share stories and dumplings and love. The crowd laughed through their tears. So welcome to our bridge, Sophie declared. Welcome to the Leon and May Language Academy, where everybody gets to be who they are and where they came from, all at the same time. Marcus handed Sophie the ceremonial scissors. Together, along with May, Rosa, Raymond, Linda, and Chen Wei, they cut the ribbon. Applause erupted, cameras flashed, and the doors opened to welcome the first students into a space built on promises kept and love that transcended time. That evening, in the quiet after the celebrations, Marcus sat with May in her apartment. Her breathing was labored now, the end approaching faster than any of them wanted to acknowledge. You did it, May whispered. You kept the promise, you brought us all home. We did it together, Marcus corrected. You, me, Sophie, all of us. May smiled. Leon would be so proud, not because you're successful or rich or famous, but because you found your way back to who you really are. She squeezed his hand weakly. Chen Ming and Marcus together. Both real, both valuable. That's the bridge, you know. The one we all have to build inside ourselves. I couldn't have done it without you. Without Sophie. Sophie is special, May agreed. But you know what makes her special? She doesn't see the world as either or. She sees and both. Both languages, both cultures, both families. She sees connection where others see division. That's the gift we have to protect in her. Marcus nodded. The scholarship fund will make sure she gets every opportunity. Harvard, Oxford, wherever she wants to go. Maybe, May said with a knowing smile. Or maybe she'll choose a different path entirely. Maybe she'll teach or write or build something we can't even imagine yet. The point is, it'll be her choice, made from a foundation of love and support and knowing exactly who she is. And they sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to Sophie and Rosa in the next room, practicing a new song in Mandarin. Thank you, Marcus said finally, for waiting for me, for believing I'd find my way back. I didn't have to believe, May replied. I knew. Your grandmother told me the day you were born. This boy will lose his way, but he'll find it again. He's got too much of me in him to stay lost forever. Marcus felt tears sliding down his face. I wish she could see this. See the school. See Sophie. See what came from that promise you made. Oh, she sees, May said with certainty. Wherever she is, whatever comes after this life, she sees. And she's smiling. May passed away peacefully 3 weeks later, surrounded by family, both blood and chosen. Her funeral was held at the Language Academy, and over 500 people attended. Students, parents, community members, and family from China who'd made the journey to honor the woman who'd kept a 50-year promise. Sophie spoke at the funeral, her voice clear and strong despite her tears. Grandma May taught me that love is the only language that doesn't need translation, she said. And that family is what we make it, not what we're born into. She made me part of her family, and I'll carry that gift forever. The school planted a tree in May's honor, a persimmon tree, the same kind that grew in Leon Chen's village courtyard. Sophie and Marcus planted it together, their hands in the dirt, building something that would outlast them both. In the months that followed, the academy thrived beyond anyone's expectations. Word spread about the school where languages met, where cultures merged, where children learned to build bridges instead of walls. Enrollment swelled. More scholarships were funded. Satellite locations began opening across the city. Marcus stepped back from his business empire, appointing a new CEO while he focused on the foundation and the academy. His father moved to Queens to be closer to the family. Chen Wei visited twice a year, bringing news and stories from the village. The connection once severed grew stronger with each passing season. And Sophie? Sophie continued to be extraordinary in the most ordinary ways. She excelled at the academy, picking up languages with ease: Spanish, French, Arabic. But more than that, she had a gift for bringing people together, for seeing past differences to the common humanity beneath. On the first anniversary of May's death, the family gathered at her grave, right next to Lian Chen's, as she'd requested. They brought offerings of fruit and incense, and Sophie read a letter she'd written in 3 languages: English, Mandarin, and Spanish. "Dear Grandma May and Grandma Lian," she read, "thank you for teaching us that love is bigger than borders, stronger than oceans, and lasting longer than any distance. Thank you for showing us that the best bridges are built with words spoken from the heart. We promise to keep building them. We promise to remember. We promise to make you proud." As the incense smoke curled into the autumn sky, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace. He wasn't lost anymore, none of them were. They were home, in every sense of the word. Grounded in heritage, open to growth, connected by promises kept and love freely given. And it had all started with a 6-year-old girl who spoke truth in a language he'd tried to forget, who saw through his armor to the lost boy beneath, who taught him that coming home isn't about going back. It's about finally being brave enough to be yourself, all of yourself, with all your languages, all your cultures, all your contradictions and complications. That's the real bridge, the one we build inside ourselves, the one that connects who we were with who we're becoming, the one that proves family isn't about blood or borders. It's about showing up, keeping promises, and loving without conditions. That's the language of redemption, and it translates perfectly into every tongue.